Of course. Here begins the new, expanded, multi-part novella version of the story you selected. The Solipsist of Relay 9, the novella, Part 1. Intro music, a very sparse, lonely, and minimalist electronic theme. A single, repeating piano note is layered over a faint, almost inaudible static hiss, creating a sense of profound isolation. It fades into the quiet, professional hum of a holographic video conference. Narrator, Dr. Isla Sterling was an expert in the particular madness that grew in the silent, empty spaces between stars. Her official title at the Deep Space Authority was psychological interventionist, but among the long-haul crews and isolated scientists, she was known as a reality anchor. Her specialty was ontological crisis, the rare but devastating psychosis that occurred when a mind, left alone for too long with the sheer, crushing scale of the universe, began to question the validity of its own existence. She was, in essence, a professional talker of people back from the brink of their own non-existence. She was just wrapping up a case now, a minor one. A geologist on a 6-month survey of a dead asteroid, who had begun to believe his own rock samples were speaking to him. Isla, her voice is calm, professional, and gently authoritative, speaking to a man on a holographic screen. The patterns you saw in the seismic data were just that, patterns. Your mind is an incredible instrument, designed to find meaning, even when there is none. You are not losing your mind, Mr. Jorik. You are just lonely. Your relief crew arrives in 3 days. You've done well. She ended the call. Another mind tethered back to the shared reality. It was rewarding work, but it was draining. She was on the verge of a long-overdue shore leave when a Priority 1 file appeared on her terminal, overriding all other protocols. It was from her director. Isla, I'm sorry to do this, but we have a situation. It's Relay 9. It's gone completely silent. Relay 9. That's Elias Vance's post, isn't it? The prodigy. I read his psych profile. Genius-level intellect, obsessive pattern-seeking tendencies. A prime candidate for ontological crisis. Worse. Relay 9 is our primary deep space listening post for potential first contact signals. Its silence is a massive security blind spot. We need you out there. Yesterday. The mission was non-negotiable. The journey to Relay 9 was a 4-day burn into the deepest, most isolated sector of charted space. During the trip, Isla immersed herself in Elias Vance's file. He was a brilliant astrophysicist who had volunteered for the lonely 5-year post. She listened to his early station logs. His voice was full of wonder and scientific passion, beautifully describing the nebulae and stellar phenomena he was observing. There was no hint of the madness to come. The light from this pulsar is a perfect metronome, a heartbeat in the dark. There's a music to it. A hidden mathematical language. It's breathtaking. A music to it. The phrase sent a small, cold shiver down Isla's spine. It was often how it began. The search for music in the static. She arrived at Relay 9 on the 5th day. It was a small, functional station, a spider web of antennas and sensor arrays anchored to a central habitat module, floating alone in an endless sea of stars. There were no signs of damage. No distress beacon. Just silence. She docked her vessel, her hand resting on the handle of the medical case that contained the powerful sedative she hoped she wouldn't have to use. As the airlock cycled, she prepared herself for the worst. She expected to find chaos, filth, walls covered in frantic equations, or worse, a man lost to catatonia. But the station was not in chaos. It was pristine. Obsessively so. Every tool was in its proper place. Every surface gleamed. It was the sign of a mind imposing a terrifying, absolute order on its environment. And sitting in the station's central control room, calmly reading a datapad and drinking a cup of tea, was Elias Vance. He was thin, with an intense but gentle gaze. He looked up as she entered and smiled. It was a warm, genuine, and completely untroubled smile that was the most unsettling thing she had ever seen. "Dr. Sterling. You're right on schedule. I've just brewed a fresh pot. Please, come in. It's been so long since I had a visitor. Elias. It's good to see you. You've had us worried. You haven't responded to any hails for 3 weeks. I know. I apologize for that. I had to be sure before I initiated contact. The final variable had to be introduced to test the system's response. Isla, the final variable. You, doctor." He took a slow sip of his tea. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't had a psychotic break. I've had an awakening. I have, through rigorous scientific observation and data analysis, come to the only logical, verifiable conclusion. I am the only real, sentient consciousness in the universe." He gave her that same, gentle, pitying smile. "And you are the most sophisticated and convincing simulation the system has ever sent me." Isla felt a cold pit open in her stomach. This was new. This was not in the textbooks. Ah, yes. The solipsism diagnosis. I anticipated that would be your programmed response. It's the most logical explanation from within the simulation's framework. But I have proof. Not feelings or paranoia. Data. Would you like to see it? Before she could answer, he turned to the main holographic display. He brought up a complex waveform, a representation of the cosmic microwave background radiation. The background radiation of the universe. The echo of the Big Bang. The most random data set known to science. At least, that's what we're taught. He began to type, a complex fractal decompression algorithm appearing on the screen. But when you filter out the perceived chaos, when you look for the deeper patterns. My mother used to sing that to me when I was a child, on the colony on Titan. A song no one else in the universe could possibly know. And yet, here it is. Written in the background radiation of spacetime itself. He turned to face her, his expression no longer just calm, but filled with the profound, unshakable certainty of a prophet. "The universe is whispering to me, doctor. It has been my entire life. How can you explain that?" Isla stood in the silent, humming station, millions of miles from everything she had ever known. She had come here to anchor a man back to her reality. But he had just presented her with a piece of his own that was utterly, terrifyingly, impossible to explain. The duel for the nature of existence had begun. Dr. Isla Sterling, a woman whose entire career was built on the bedrock of empirical data and observable reality, stood in stunned silence. The impossible melody, the ghost of a lullaby from a dead man's childhood, echoed in the quiet room, a sound that defied all logic. Her mind, a fortress of scientific reason, was under siege. She fought back with the only weapons she had. "Elias, what you've shown me is a remarkable example of apophenia. Your mind, in its extreme isolation, is projecting a familiar pattern onto random cosmic noise. It's a known psychological phenomenon. I considered that, of course. For the first year. So I ran a double-blind analysis. I had the station's computer search for other patterns, any other patterns, of similar complexity. It found none. I then fed the lullaby data into a probability matrix. The odds of that specific, ordered sequence of signals occurring naturally are greater than the number of atoms in the known universe. It is not a pattern my mind is creating, Dr.It is a message my mind was created to receive. Or it's a feedback loop. A glitch. Your mother's song could be in your psych profile, a stray piece of data the station's sensors picked up and are now reflecting back at you from the cosmic static. A lovely theory. But it doesn't account for the other proofs." He turned to a different console, pulling up a series of station logs, each one flagged with a red, emergency, warning. "Year 3 of my post," he began, "a micrometeoroid swarm, traveling at near relativistic speeds. The station's early warning system failed. The odds of a direct impact with this control module were 87%. Yet, the lead particle, the one that would have pierced this very window, was deflected by a single, impossibly timed plasma burst from a nearby magnetar, half a light year away. He brought up another log. Year 5. A life support glitch. A hairline fracture in a coolant pipe was about to vent toxic fluid into the air recycler. It would have been a slow, unpleasant death. But just before the pressure reached a critical point, an unlogged, external power surge from a passing rogue comet's tail rebooted the entire system, resetting the pressure and giving me time to find and patch the leak. He looked at her, his eyes clear and rational. These are not accidents, Doctor. This is narrative causality. The simulation will not allow its primary subject to be eliminated by a random number generator. It's poor game design. The story must be protected. Isla felt a chill creep down her spine. He spoke of his own life as if it were a novel he was reading. Every argument she presented, every logical explanation, he met with a calm, polite, and perfectly structured counterargument that folded her logic back into his own terrifying worldview. He had been alone for 5 years, with nothing to do but perfect the architecture of his delusion. It was a flawless prison of the mind. Seeing her struggle, Elias shifted his own tactics. He went on the offensive, not with anger, but with quiet, unnerving curiosity. He began to psychoanalyze her. You see, your arrival is the most compelling proof of all. I was growing, bored. The patterns were becoming predictable. My story was losing its narrative thrust. And then, just as I was considering a more dramatic course of action, a new character is introduced. A specialist. A reality anchor. A beautiful, intelligent woman sent to challenge my new worldview and create new, interesting conflict. You are the second act. Are you? Or is that simply your core programming? Tell me, Dr. Sterling, what is your deepest, most irrational fear? Is it a simulation as advanced as you must have a fear subroutine to make you believable, to give your character depth and stakes? Is it spiders? The dark? Or is it something more profound? Is it the fear of being insignificant? A program running in a box, with no true free will of its own. He was gaslighting her, using the very tools of her own trade to pick apart the foundations of her reality. She felt her own professional certainty, her own sense of self, begin to waver under his calm, surgical questioning. The oppressive, absolute silence of the station, broken only by his serene, logical voice, was a powerful psychological weapon. For a terrifying, fleeting moment, she looked at her own hands and wondered if they were truly there. She shook her head, forcing herself back to her training. She had to break this loop. Isla, and what is the end game, Elias? If this is a story, what is the third act? Elias's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of profound, cosmic weariness. Elias, I believe I have reached the end of this narrative arc. I have learned all I can from this simulation. I have found the patterns, I have understood the rules, and now, I have met the most complex character it has to offer. The story is over. It is time to see what's next. It is time to force a reboot. He gestured to the station's small fusion reactor, its core glowing with a steady, blue light behind a shielded window. Elias, I have discovered a way to create a controlled overload. Not an explosion. A clean, instantaneous dissolution of the entire station back into its base energy. It will be painless. An elegant end to the simulation. It would delete your program, Doctor. And I am sorry for that. You have been a wonderful addition to the story. As for me, I am not so sure. Perhaps I will wake up in the real world. Perhaps I will simply start a new game plus. Either way, it will be a new experience. He stood up and walked towards the reactor control panel, his movements calm and deliberate. But, because I have so enjoyed our conversation, I will grant you a final courtesy. A last puzzle for my favorite character to solve. One cycle. 24 hours from this moment. Provide me with one piece of empirical, irrefutable evidence that you are a conscious, sentient being, and not just a beautiful, complex program. If you can do that, I will stop. He turned to her, his eyes holding not madness, but a serene, philosophical certainty. If not, the game ends tomorrow, at 0900 station time. Isla stood frozen in the silent, humming control room. The clock had started. She was no longer just a doctor trying to cure a patient. She was a program, tasked by the god of her own perceived reality with proving her own existence, before he decided to delete the world. Dr. Isla Sterling stood in the silent heart of Relay 9, a prisoner in a cage of flawless logic. Elias Vance, her patient, her captor, the serene god of his own pocket universe, had given her a 24-hour ultimatum. Prove she was real. An impossible task. How do you prove a soul to a man who believes souls are just elegant code? She spent the first few hours in a frantic, desperate flurry of intellectual combat. She retreated to her temporary quarters and marshaled every philosophical and scientific argument she had ever learned. She confronted him again, her datapad loaded with the collected wisdom of centuries. She spoke of Gödel's incompleteness theorems, arguing that no logical system, including his simulation, could ever be complex enough to truly prove its own consistency. Of course, the programmers would have included such paradoxes intentionally. It makes the simulation feel more authentic, less designed. She argued from a position of computational physics, explaining the sheer, universe-sized amount of energy required to simulate reality down to the quantum level for a single observer. An excellent point. Which is why it's more likely that only the things I am directly observing are rendered at high fidelity. The rest of the universe probably exists as a low-resolution statistical model until I turn my attention to it. It's very efficient. She tried a final, desperate appeal to shared humanity. She showed him a recording of a symphony, a piece of art so complex and beautiful it was considered a pinnacle of human achievement. Could a machine, a program, create this, Elias? This much beauty? This much pain? Doctor, your own civilization has created sentient AIs capable of composing music indistinguishable from the masters. Why would my simulation be any less sophisticated? That is beautiful, yes. But it is simply a product of a very advanced procedural generation. Every argument she made, every piece of evidence she presented, he calmly and politely folded into the unshakable logic of his delusion. He was not a madman ranting at the walls. He was a brilliant, rational mind who had found a single, unifying theory that explained his entire existence. And she, with all her training, all her science, could not find a single, empirical flaw in it. She was losing. Her own reality, under the pressure of his serene certainty, began to feel thin, brittle. The final hour arrived. The station's chronometer chimed, marking the beginning of the end. Elias stood up, his face holding not a trace of malice, but a look of sincere, philosophical anticipation. Our time is up, Doctor. I want to thank you. This has been the most interesting and challenging narrative expansion the simulation has ever provided me. You are a truly remarkable piece of programming. He walked towards the station's reactor control panel, visible behind a shielded window. But all stories must end. I am ready for the next one. Isla's heart hammered in her chest. Logic had failed. Science had failed. There was only one thing left. One thing that a machine, a simulation designed for a single subject's benefit, should not be able to compute. An act of pure, illogical, self-sacrificing empathy. She walked calmly and stood directly in front of the reactor's emergency overload panel, placing herself between Elias and the controls. He stopped, his brow furrowed in genuine curiosity. All right, Elias. Let's accept your premise for a moment. Let's say I am a program. My core function, my prime directive, must be to ensure the continuation of the simulation and the well-being of its subject, you. Overloading this reactor would be an act of self-harm. My programming should, logically, compel me to stop you at all costs. I should be restraining you right now. That would be the correct move for a program designed to protect its user. She held his gaze. But I'm not going to do that. She took a deep breath, preparing for the final, desperate leap. Isla, I'm not going to restrain you, because I am not a program following a script. I am a person, making a choice. And my choice is to believe that you are also a real person, a man in profound pain, about to make a terrible mistake. I cannot logically prove my existence to you. Words and data have failed. So I will offer you the only piece of empirical evidence I have left. She placed her hand gently on the cold glass of the reactor shielding. Isla, my life. If you believe the only way to win this game is to push that button, then you will have to do it knowing that you are destroying me. A benevolent simulation, a good game, would not allow its player to win by committing an act of murder that would inflict such profound psychological trauma upon its one and only subject. That's poor design, Elias. She had presented him with a paradox. Not a logical one, but a moral one. Her act was both a defiance of her supposed programming, and an appeal to the simulation's own supposed rules. It was a move he could not compute. He stared at her, his serene certainty finally, completely, shattering. The calm mask fell away, revealing the terrified, lonely man beneath. He looked at her hand on the glass, then at the override switch, then back at her. His own mind was now a battlefield, his perfect, airtight logic at war with her impossible, illogical act of faith. What was the more likely truth? That the simulation would sacrifice its most interesting character to let him win? Or that the woman in front of him was real, and her life was now in his hands? His hand, hovering over the final button, began to tremble. For 5 years, Dr. Anya Sharma had been a ghost. She and her small science vessel, the Stellifer, drifted through the forgotten, untrafficked lanes of the galaxy, a tiny speck of anonymity in a sea of stars. She lived a life of constant motion and deep paranoia, haunted by the secret she carried. The secret was the silence she had created on Xylos, the day she had unspoken a language and erased a miracle to save the universe from itself. But she had not left Xylos entirely alone. In a specially designed, lead-lined, and bio-sealed containment bay at the heart of her ship, was the only other survivor of that day. The Sprout. The single, impossible, living thing she had created from dust with a word. In 5 years, it had grown into a small, strange, crystalline tree, about a meter tall. Its fractal branches, a perfect echo of the forest she had destroyed, glowed with a soft, internal light. She called it Echo.it was her companion, her secret, and her terror. Because Echo was not just a plant. It was a living library. It was generating new words, new fractal patterns of light and sound that shimmered around its branches like heat haze. They were unstable, evolving, a new dialect of the fossil word being born. She studied them, catalogued them, but never, ever dared to speak them. The power to create was growing again, and she was its solitary, terrified guardian. Warning, warning, catastrophic failure in the primary plasma conduit. Main reactor is, offline. Containment field, destabilizing. Anya worked frantically, her past life as a focused academic replaced by the grim efficiency of a long-term fugitive. She contained the reactor breach, but the diagnosis was fatal. The ship's main power conduit had ruptured. It was a repair she could not possibly make herself. Analysis complete, Anya. The damage is critical. We are adrift. Life support will fail in 96 hours. The AI paused. There is one option. The independent way station, Garrison's Point, is a week away at our current velocity on backup thrusters. It is our only chance. Garrison's Point. A sprawling, chaotic, but functional hub of smugglers, mechanics, and information brokers. It was the last place Anya wanted to go. A station that busy was full of sensors, full of eyes. Exposing Echo, even shielded in the heart of her ship, to that many active scanners was a risk she had never been willing to take. But now, she had no choice. The Stellifer limped into a repair dock at Garrison's Point, a small, scarred science vessel amidst giant, ugly freighters. Anya hired a gruff but skilled ship mechanic, a woman named Corbin, paying her with salvaged platinum components from her own engine to avoid a traceable credit transaction. The repairs would take at least 3 days. 3 days of being stationary. 3 days of being exposed. Anya tried to keep a low profile, holing up in a dingy cantina in the station's lower levels. But she knew her ship, even powered down, was not silent. Not in the way that mattered. The living language in its heart was a constant, low-level source of ontological friction, a whisper of reality-warping energy that was undetectable to standard ship sensors, but perhaps not to everyone. Miles away, in a secret, orbiting archive known only as the Athenaeum, a man in the simple gray robes of a scholar looked at a shimmering holographic display. He was Archivist Thorne, a high-ranking member of a secretive academic and scientific body known only as the Curators. Their sole purpose was to find, contain, and preserve knowledge and technologies they deemed too dangerous for general circulation. They were the universe's benevolent, obsessive, and utterly ruthless librarians. Archivist. An alert from one of our deep-range ontological sensors at Garrison's Point. A minor but persistent ripple in spacetime causality. The signature is unique. It is not a weapon, nor a standard temporal anomaly. It feels linguistic. Linguistic. Interesting. Cross-reference the signature with all known data on reality-altering phenomena. And dispatch a field team to Garrison's Point. I want them to locate the source of this ripple. Quietly. And report back to me before they do anything else. On her second day on the station, Anya felt it. A change in the atmosphere. A new kind of attention. She noticed people watching her. Not thugs or thieves, but quiet, observant men and women in simple, practical clothing, who would meet her eyes for a moment too long before looking away. They never approached, but they were always there. Her datapad buzzed with an anonymous, encrypted message. It was from an information broker she had paid for local intel. The message was one word: Curators. Anya's blood ran cold. She knew of the Curators. A phantom organization, a myth among academics. They were said to have infinite resources and a single-minded purpose. To hoard dangerous knowledge. And they had just found her. She abandoned her drink and ran, pushing through the crowds, heading for the repair dock. She had to get to her ship. She had to leave, finished or not. She rounded the final corner and skidded to a halt. Her ship, the Stellifer, was still in its repair cradle. And standing calmly at the bottom of its boarding ramp was a serene, gray-haired man in scholar's robes. It was Archivist Thorne. He was flanked by the same quiet, observant people she had seen in the cantina. They were not armed with weapons, but with strange, silver canisters and devices that hummed with a low, contained energy. Dr. Anya Sharma. Please, do not be alarmed. We are not here to harm you. He gestured to her ship. The ontological event you triggered on Xylos 5 years ago left a scar on the fabric of reality. A beautiful, tragic echo. We have been studying it for some time. But this new signature, it is not an echo. It is a living voice. He looked at her with eyes that held no malice, only a profound, unshakable certainty. Whatever you have created, whatever you are harboring on that ship, it is an anomaly of the highest order. For the safety of the galactic community, and for its own preservation, it must be contained. Please. Do not make this difficult. He wasn't a corporate goon seeking profit. He was a zealot, a guardian who believed his actions were for the greater good. And that, Anya knew, made him infinitely more dangerous. She was trapped, her secret was out, and her ship, her home, her last living miracle, was in their hands. Dr. Anya Sharma stood trapped at the foot of her own ship's ramp, a cornered animal in a cage of quiet, determined scholars. Archivist Thorne and his curators formed a loose, calm semicircle, cutting off all escape. Their silver devices hummed softly, not with the threat of violence, but with the sterile promise of containment. There were no drawn weapons, no shouted commands. There was only the immense, suffocating weight of their absolute certainty. Dr. Sharma, this does not need to escalate. We are not the brutes from Chrysalis Corporation. We do not seek to exploit your discovery. We seek only to protect it, and to protect the rest of the universe from it. Some knowledge is too powerful for any one individual to hold. And you believe you are worthy of being its jailers? You would put a miracle in a box. We would put a fire in a furnace, where it can be studied without burning the house down. What you have on that ship is a living, evolving form of the language you silenced on Xylos. It is unstable. Unpredictable. Now, please. Help us secure the anomaly. Two of the curator agents stepped forward, their humming containment devices raised. Anya knew she had only seconds. She could not fight them, she could not reason with them. Her only option was to embrace the very instability they feared. She had to use a word she did not understand. She raised her portable vocalizer, her fingers flying across its interface, selecting one of the new, shimmering, chaotic glyphs that the tree, echo, had been generating. A word she had theorized meant barrier, or wall, but which was far more complex than the simple, elemental words of the old language. It was not a wall of stone that erupted before her. Instead, the very air between her and the curators seemed to warp and shimmer. Space itself folded. The image of the hangar bent and twisted as if seen through a broken lens. A field of pure, spatial distortion, a barrier made of broken physics, materialized before them. The curators cried out in shock, stumbling back, their precise scientific minds utterly unprepared for such a raw, chaotic manifestation. Their containment devices whined and sparked, unable to get a lock on the anomaly. It was the opening Anya needed. She turned and scrambled up the ramp into the stellifer, slamming the airlock shut behind her. But as she reached the cockpit, a new alert flashed on her screen. Warning! An unknown object was affixed to the outer hull during the repairs. It has just activated. It is a curator-grade quantum entanglement beacon. A tracking device. She looked at the hangar's external camera feed. Archivist Thorne was standing calmly amidst the spatial distortion, his face serene. He had anticipated her escape. He had let her run. Now, he could follow her anywhere in the galaxy. Anya pushed her ship into the sky, leaving Garrison's Point behind. But there was no relief. She was a mouse with a bell tied around her neck. The chase had only just begun. As she reached orbit, she saw it on her sensors. A sleek, silver curator vessel detaching from its hidden position and beginning to pursue her. She was trapped. She could run from system to system, but they would always find her. Her life would be an endless, paranoid flight. She looked at the monitor displaying the containment bay. The small, crystalline tree, Echo, was pulsing with a soft, steady light, seemingly unaware of the danger it was in. She thought of the final word from Xylos. The word of silence. The word of unmaking. She could end this. She could speak that word again, destroy Echo, and the threat would be gone forever. Her secret would be safe. She would be free. A sterile, lonely, and silent freedom, bought with the death of the last miracle in the universe. Or, there was another way. A different word. She had seen it forming in Echo's light patterns over the last few weeks. A new glyph of immense complexity, one that seemed to connect all the others. It was a word that felt like a star about to be born. She did not know what it meant. It could be a word of healing, or a word of destruction. It was the ultimate unknown. A gamble against the certainty of a life on the run. She looked from the pursuing curator ship on her scanner to the beautiful, living tree in her containment bay. And she made her choice. She would not choose the silence of the past. She would choose the chaos of the future. Lex. Isolate the new primary glyph. The one we designated Genesis. Power the vocalizer with the main reactor. I want every bit of energy we have. Anya, that is inadvisable. The energy release will be catastrophic. We have no way of predicting what this word will do. She stood before the containment bay, looking at the tree, her creation, her burden. She keyed the vocalizer. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. A wave of shimmering, emerald green energy erupted from the tree. It did not destroy. It grew. The crystalline branches of Echo surged outwards, not breaking through the walls of the containment bay, but merging with them. The metal of the ship itself began to change, its surface shifting, reforming into the same complex, crystalline patterns as the tree. The Stellifer was no longer a machine carrying a plant. The two were becoming one. The wave of creation energy expanded outwards, washing over the pursuing curator ship. Their sophisticated containment devices and sensors, designed to analyze and control, were overwhelmed by a force that was purely creative. Their systems overloaded, their ship going dark and dead in space. Back on Anya's ship, the transformation was complete. The bridge was no longer a room of cold metal and plastic. The walls were now a warm, glowing, semi-translucent crystal. The hum of the engine was replaced by a soft, living, musical thrum. Echo was no longer in its bay, it was the bay. It was the ship. Anya placed her hand on a wall, and she could feel the thrum of the living language, the heartbeat of her new, biomechanical vessel. She was no longer a fugitive in a machine. She was the pilot, the partner, the consciousness of a living starship, with a thought, a new kind of FTL drive, one based on the fossil word's ability to bend space, engaged. The Stellifer vanished, leaving the disabled curators behind. Anya Sharma was Final.